Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. I can't actually hear the room, so if you want to get my attention, wave your arms and like gesticulate your question to me, or have someone type it to me, and then I'll reply. All right. So, yeah, my name's JT. I work on a whole bunch of stuff. One of them is the Nushell project, and I helped create Nushell about 3.5 years ago. We started with some simple ideas. One of PowerShell at the time, and said, well, PowerShell is great if you're coming at it from a .NET perspective, but what about the Rust perspective? What does something like PowerShell look like and feel like from a Rust perspective? If you look at the differences, Rust isn't as object oriented, and it leans on things like Serde and the way that iterators work, like lazy iteration. Those ideas percolated, and then we had a third person join us, Andres Robolino, who kind of added this idea of it being very data centric. So I'm going to give, for the next few minutes, we're going to go through what Nushell is and how it works. And you'll see some of how Rust specific style makes Nushell Nushell. All right, before I start on the demo, let me see hands. I can see the room, but I can't hear anybody. Hands, can everyone see the terminal okay? Good? Okay, great. Let's go. So here we go. The first thing that you'll notice when you run Nushell. Oh, actually, before I even do this, by show of hands, how many people have actually used Nushell ever? Okay, like 2 or 3. Okay, great. So this will be perfect. I'm going to just run ls. If I run ls, you see I get a table, right? A table of output. This table is structured data. From the inspiration of things like PowerShell, we were thinking, you know what we could do is have a kind of Serde's view of data, which is like a universal data model. So if we have all the commands speak this universal data model, to use the Unix pipelines of sending text between commands, we can just send structured data. And so that's what this is doing. When I type ls, I create a lazy iterator in Rust. And that lazy iterator, once it hits kind of the CLI, it's like, oh, I have a lazy iterator. Let me display the contents for you. And that's really what we're looking at, is the inside. Each one of what we're seeing is actually itself a record. So if I wanted to say get, say, row 6, let me just move it up so you can see a little bit better. That is a record that says, name, type, size, modified. This record is one of the things streaming towards us. That allows us to do a whole bunch of really fun things. One of them is at cable using some filter commands, just like you might in Rust, to be able to sort them or filter them. Let's say we'll take the output and we'll sort by the size of the file, right? And you get this output. Let's actually do reverse, and then we'll have the big ones on the top. And then I'll also say, give me just files in this directory. For folks who are used to just bash and not even using a structured shell, try to think through what you might have to do the equivalent in bash, right? You have to remember the flags, you have to make sure you compose it correctly. But here, because everything is this nice universal data language or data format underneath, we can just stick them together and they work. Same idea. I get my process list now instead of the list of files, and the process list has the same, tables and columns. So if I wanted to do the same idea, I can sort by the memory and then do the same, reverse this, then take the first, 5, whatever. Same exact commands that I just did for ls, I can apply to ps. And the idea is, so long as we can connect to a data source and translate that into what Nushell understands, we can connect to all kinds of things. So here I've got the Nushell source code. Like many Rust projects, this has a cargo toml file. I'm just going to open that cargo toml file. And you can see the structure of the cargo toml file in Nushell. This allows us, again, to use all the same commands. So if I wanted to grab out the features, I could say open Font size is too small. All right, we can go larger. I present full screen. I'm pretty close to full screen, yeah. So can people see this okay? No? Ish? That's about as full screen as I got. How about now? All right. Hopefully that's okay. There we go, just a size larger to you. All right, so we did the open of the cargo toml, and then I will pull out from here. What was I going to pull out? Let's just pull out the package. So we'll say get package, and then we can see files package. And then if I really wanted to, I could then take this structured data and put it out into something else. So I could save this as, you know, package.json. Sure. And then if I open the package.json raw, that's the text. So it's just a JSON file. So we can open arbitrary things that Serde supports, like tomls and JSON and XML and even XLSX, so Excel files. We can get the content from them, use a standard set of filters, save it back out into some whatever format that you want. So the idea really is that you can compose using this universal data system. Let me show you a little bit more complicated example. So I was just doing this earlier today because I was working with the dig command. Now let me run this first, and then we'll talk through what this is doing. If you've used dig before, you'll notice that I can start with a command that's outside of Nushell. Like, things don't have to be ported into the Nushell world for them to work. And this is a great example. So I'm calling dig to get the records for nushell.sh, which incidentally happens to also be the website if you want to learn more about Nushell. We pull out text, or just bytes really, from dig, and then immediately start using these bytes. We're going to turn those into lines, and then we'll skip the first 3 lines. If I take out all of that up to, if I just do the lines first, and we see this a step at a time, right, then what we get is that text, but as these lines. Then I can skip them, and now I'm starting to build up what that table is going to become. Okay. Here we're making a string and then detecting the columns from the text in the output. Once we do that, the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. If we see the whole thing now, we detect the columns, we rename the columns to be what we want, and then I go one step further, and it says update the time column, start with the time as a string, turn it into an integer, and then take that and multiply it by 1 second. So this 1 second, you may notice, is colored specifically to say, hey, this is a duration. This is actually a supported special type inside of Nushell. So I can now get the length of time in a kind of a structured duration for how long until this refresh. We look back at LS, we see the same thing here. File sizes, dates, and so on are all native to Nushell and how Nushell thinks about the world. Let me also kind of turn this quickly into a function. So I'm going to make a function called, let's call it digit. Digit, we'll take in a name, and then we will dig whatever that name is and get that back out. So we now have dig it. So if I say dig it nushell.sh, you see I get the same, drive home the point. If I wanted to, I could say where the IP is equal to, and maybe I want one where the IP is like 110, let's say, as a string. Oh, this incidentally is a good example of the error messages. So you can see that it says, hey, a string came from detect column, and then you're trying to use that and compare that to integer. So then I fix it, and then I get the answer. So it really is a lot of what makes Rust really fun the kind of performance aspects. It's very high performance. It uses a lot of techniques that we use in Rust. And it also uses the same philosophy around things like error messages to give you something that's really clear and understandable as an error message if you ever do anything wrong. Let me show you one last thing, and then I'll call it at that. If you download Nushell and start it up, the first thing you'll see is how to get involved if you enjoy using Nushell. We've got a Discord, we've got GitHub, of course. You can hit us up on Twitter. And yeah, thanks for listening. It's just like a normal shell. Once you exit the shell, they kind of evaporate. Yes. So TFPK gets the gold star. Since you've basically made a new functional, Nushell has grown from our original aspirations of being, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have a PowerShell, but like the Rust specific version of that? And it has a full scripting language now. And so absolutely, we're looking at ways of moving into things like notebooks and more data. It's not POSIX. It's a very, it's trying to be much more modern. I'll just say it that way. Nushell works across operating systems. You can use it on Linux, Windows, Mac OS. I have it on my Android phone if you want. It took the most time to implement. I'm not entirely sure. We tend to rewrite a lot of stuff, so it's hard to tell for sure. I think a couple of things that are most confusing. It is a different language, so you do have to kind of learn the Nushell way of doing things. Um, Once you do, I think it starts to kind of click. We don't have job control yet. I think that's another one that people expect to be working, but we want to try to figure out a good cross-platform job control. Cool. Anyone in the room? I'm kind of answering the. Anyone in the room a question? Oh, you're good? Okay, great. People's patience. All right, cool. Thanks, everybody.